Why aren't the police officers who shot Breonna Taylor facing criminal charges? What does the government have to prove in order to convict police officers who shoot civilians? What does the lawsuit filed by Breonna Taylor's family allege? And what does the family have to overcome in order to win this lawsuit against all three officers? This is Thursday's Child. I'm your host, Keisha Toni, a former teacher turned constitutional lawyer, here to bring you your weekly lesson on the law. So let's get started. In part 1, we discussed the facts surrounding the shooting of Breonna Taylor. Currently, the question on everyone's mind is why haven't the police officers involved in that shooting been arrested? Criminal conviction requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, a very high standard. In order to convict the officers that shot Breonna Taylor of murder, the state of Kentucky would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the officers who shot her did not do so in self-defense. Because of the nature of the facts here, this might be a difficult hurdle. But remember, the Kentucky Attorney General's office and the FBI are still conducting their investigation into Breonna Taylor's death, and they have not released their findings yet. When they do, we'll have a better idea about whether criminal charges will be filed against the officers and what those criminal charges say. Now let's discuss the civil case filed by Breonna Taylor's family against the Louisville police officers. The family sued the police officers in their individual capacity. That means it does not sue them as employees for Louisville Police Department. The complaint sues for battery, wrongful death, excessive force, negligence, and gross negligence. The complaint alleges that the officers had a knock and announce warrant, that each officer entered without knocking and announcing their presence as police officers, and that the police officers spray gunfire into the residence with a, quote, total disregard for the value of human life. The complaint relies on the officers having a duty to knock, and because they didn't knock or announce themselves, it alleges that they had no lawful right to be in Breonna's home that night. It also says the officers failed to follow procedures that also deprived them of their authority to be in Breonna's home. The biggest hurdle to the family's case is going to be overcoming the thick shield of qualified immunity. So what is qualified immunity? Qualified immunity shields law enforcement officers from civil liability unless the officers, 1, violated a statutory or constitutional right, and 2, the unlawfulness of their conduct was, quote, clearly established at the time. Both prongs must be met to win. So we'll begin our discussion and focus our discussion on the second prong, because this is where we will see the teeth of qualified immunity. Clearly established means that the law is so clear at the time of the incident that every reasonable officer in that position would have understood the unlawfulness of that conduct. The law must be very specific. That means there must be a case on this issue stating that this exact conduct is unlawful. Now, without such a case, the plaintiff will almost always lose. An example of how specific the law must be is a suit where an officer allowed a police dog to bite a suspect while he was handcuffed and laying on the ground. The suspect was actually able to identify a case where the police let a police dog bite a suspect while he was handcuffed and sitting up. Now, that sounds pretty close. But because one suspect was sitting up and the other was laying down, the court concluded that this was not clearly established. And that suspect lost. So, based on this example, you can see that Breonna's family has an uphill battle. So first, nearly every news report I read about this case said that the officers had a no-knock warrant. I read a report where the judge said she signed a no-knock warrant, and we know that Louisville banned no-knock warrants and called it Breonna's law. So this aspect of the complaint is really perplexing to me. Regardless, even if the family can prove the police should have knocked and didn't, they would then have to prove that the officers didn't have the authority to shoot back at Kenneth Walker when he shot at them and hit one of the officers. Specifically, the family is going to have to identify a case that says this would not be self-defense. This will be very difficult. So as you can see, qualified immunity is a strong doctrine protecting police officers. And while it's important to ensure that police officers have some shield from going to prison for honest mistakes, qualified immunity goes pretty far in shielding police from behavior that an ordinary civilian would never get away with. Now, some of the facts of the cases that the U.S. Supreme Court refused to review this summer are really alarming, to say the least. One was a case where an officer was outside searching a family's property for a suspect. He aims and tries to shoot a little dog, a non-threatening dog that's coming at him, and he misses that small dog and shoots a child instead. Qualified immunity shielded that officer from liability. Now, you may have read that Colorado recently abolished qualified immunity. That's because qualified immunity is court-created doctrine, and legislation always supersedes case law. So that means if you want to adjust or get rid of qualified immunity, you need to convince your state legislature to write a law about it. Breonna Taylor's story is tragic. And while changing the law on qualified immunity, no-knock warrants, or body cameras can't bring Breonna back or even help her family in their lawsuit right now, hopefully these steps that I've given you can give you the knowledge you need to feel empowered and know that you can change the laws that you believe are unjust, as long as you stay involved in your state government. We've covered a lot of material today, so we're going to stop right here. Drop any of your questions in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video and the channel. Thanks for watching Thursday's Child. I'm Keisha Toni. See you next time.